If there's one subject that never stops surprising dedicated history enthusiasts, it's the depth of practical knowledge buried in World War II archives. Some of the smartest survival methods weren't used on the battlefield at all, but inside ordinary homes. In the first years of the war, before large-scale evacuations and before the full machine of military defence was in place, civilians relied on old-world ingenuity and practical measures that worked then and, honestly, still work now. And while modern security companies push gadgets and quick fixes, one method developed during World War II hasn't lost an ounce of its effectiveness. It's simple, it's inexpensive, it's nearly impossible for an intruder to bypass without giving themselves away. And well, most people step right past it without knowing they're looking at one of the most reliable home defense systems ever used. This guide breaks down what that method was, how it functioned, and why it remains relevant today. If you're a serious history buff, you already know that wartime innovation tends to be very direct. No theories, no guesswork, just blunt practicality shaped by necessity. That's exactly what you're about to get. So let's walk straight into the forgotten World War II home defence that still stops intruders today. When German bombings threatened British cities during the Blitz, the government encouraged civilians to reinforce their homes against more than bombs. Looting, break-ins and opportunistic criminals surged during blackouts. The simplest and most effective defensive method turned out not to be a weapon or a barricade, but an acoustic warning system built with household materials. Civilians strung tensioned wires, metal objects and improvised noise traps across entry points. These weren't booby traps in the military sense. They were legal, non-harmful early warning lines that alerted a homeowner the instant someone touched a door, lifted a window or set foot inside. The idea was ancient, but World War II refined it. In blackout conditions, sound became more valuable than sight. Families who didn't have electricity or lived in bomb-damaged buildings depended entirely on their ears. Even if an intruder managed to break a lock quietly, they couldn't avoid brushing against a tensioned wire attached to tins, tools, bells, glass fragments held in safe containers, or any metal object that could clatter loudly. Nothing about this required strength. It required awareness, which civilians had plenty of. Many World War II defences became obsolete with technology, but acoustic intrusion detection stayed relevant because it's built on physics, not trends. A determined intruder can disable a camera, cut a power line, muffle a smart device, jam a signal, or slip past a motion sensor. What they can't do is move silently through a physical space wired to react mechanically. That's why the method survived long after the war. Farmers used it in barns. Isolated families used it in remote cabins. Today, survivalists and off-grid homeowners still rely on it because it functions without electricity, doesn't break down, and doesn't require constant monitoring. During the Second World War, the most effective versions were actually placed at knee height across entry points, because intruders rarely look down in darkness. The British Home Guard even distributed these simple guides showing how to reinforce door frames so that wires would tighten automatically when the door was left unlatched. The sound, well, it was unmistakable. This method created just enough surprise and noise to wake the household and, honestly, send most criminals running. Now, a modern version doesn't need to look historical at all. The principle stays the same, right? You want to create a mechanical alert that activates only when someone tries to cross a boundary. The easiest practical adaptation, really, is a tensioned fishing line attached to a lightweight metal object hanging just behind a door or window frame. When the line moves, the object tips and strikes another piece of metal. Anyone inside hears it instantly. Another option is placing a wire-triggered canister filled with loose washers or metal bearings on a shelf behind a window. If the window is opened, the wire lifts the container just enough that the bearings slide and create unmistakable noise. WWII homeowners often put these right next to beds so they could react immediately without fumbling in the dark. For those wanting something stronger without harming anyone, a door-mounted bar system works just as well. These aren't bracing devices meant to stop the intruder physically, but sound amplifiers. When pressure hits the door, the bar rattles inside its brackets. This exact technique was used extensively in heavily bombed regions where people slept in shifts and needed alerts that wouldn't fail under debris or blackout conditions. What made this technique invaluable during WWII and what keeps it relevant is redundancy. Civilians had no guarantee that emergency services could respond. They couldn't risk relying only on a lock or hoping that noise outside would wake them. Their homes were dark, windows taped, electricity unreliable. The acoustic line became part of daily life. It didn't replace vigilance, it empowered it. Today, the same logic stands. When power goes out, when rural distances slow response times, or when you simply want a layer of defence no intruder expects, this forgotten WWII home defence still performs flawlessly. A practical example for modern use is wiring a back door, basement entry or garage door. The places intruders statistically target first because they're usually weakest. A single length of cord, a trigger point, and a sound source is all it takes. This is why museums, wilderness outposts, and off-grid lodges still use variations of the method. Its reliability doesn't come from sophistication. It comes from the fact that the intruder must break the boundary, and breaking the boundary makes noise. The forgotten WWII home defence that still stops intruders today remains one of the simplest and most dependable layers of security any homeowner can add. And that's exactly why it deserves attention from serious historians and survivalists. It's a reminder that some of the smartest wartime innovations didn't rely on weapons. They relied on intelligence, resourcefulness, and an understanding of how people move through space. When you apply it today, you're not recreating the past. You're carrying forward a technique that earned its place through real-world necessity. If you enjoyed this deep dive and want more WWII Fieldcraft civilian defences and overlooked survival history, make sure you subscribe to the channel and share this guide with someone who appreciates serious historical knowledge.